So welcome everyone to the 8th Crux showcase, but this is the first one we've done publicly. So we do these not quite every Friday, but sort of near enough, just to round up sort of what everyone's been working on, look at the new features or bug fixes, and really just give, so far it's been the wider Jux internal team a view of what's happening, but now we're extending that to the wider community who are interested in Crux. So thanks everyone for tuning in to listen to our, I guess, internal thoughts and updates. So we've got a range of speakers, everyone from the core team, minus Håkan, although Håkan is on the line, I believe, if he wants to talk. I guess the first person to talk is James Henderson, who, if you weren't aware, is a new person to the Crux team as of a few weeks ago, but already making waves. So James is going to talk you through the 1.6.0 release we did yesterday.
Yes, yeah. So quite a lot of change in the 1.6.0 release, given that it's probably been a couple of months now since the last public Crux release. I would say as well, this is within the context of a wider beta program. So just going to touch a little bit first on what that is. So for a while now, Crux has been running on getting everything working end to end, and we're really at the point now where we can start looking at all the usual production type tooling that you're going to need in order to choose a database for production. So we're looking at things like deployment tools, monitoring tools, stable APIs, looking at documentation, tutorials, benchmarks, and that kind of thing. All these things that you'd expect from a production database. But yeah, 1.6 was quite a big change, really, given it was 3 months worth of work. So we've put through a couple of breaking changes, as there will be likely through alpha. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about the evict command. So evict is the one thing within Crux currently where we deliberately don't keep the full history. So it's the one destructive update of all of the 4 transaction operations. We did previously have time ranges, so we said you could evict an entity between 2 valid times, and that actually proved to be quite tricky with regarding to completely deleting the data within that time range. So for the time being, we have removed evict time ranges from there, and we'll be looking at how we can best bring that back with a sensible semantics. I'm just going to run through the other 2 breaking changes very quickly. So the two transactions with the same millisecond, that was quite a good fun one. Obviously, as you can expect, that's quite an intermittent failure. Depends on exactly when the transactions hit. So that one took a while for us to find. And thirdly, with the put delete with the start end valid time semantics. So that's related to the evict one. We want to make sure that when you put into Crux, you can put either at a single valid time, at which point the expectation is that value is then valid until it's next changed. But also you can put with a start end time, so the value is only valid for between those 2 times, and it should then restore the value before that, after that valid time range. So all of those 3 combined together means that we unfortunately need to bump the index version. So a re-index of Crux nodes is required, and I think Jeremy's going to talk a little bit about that, I think, a bit later on. Jeremy?
Yep, definitely. Okay.
Excellent.
So one of the other things that is sort of buried in that list, something about map IDs. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, James?
Yes, yeah. So map IDs have been possible for a while now. They've been an undocumented secret feature, if you like, of Crux. But map IDs are very, very much useful for when you've got composite IDs. So when you've got an ID that depends on values in multiple fields. Given that they were unsupported, we did have a couple of issues with them. We've now ironed those out. And so we're happy to recommend those to be used if you do have composite IDs for your documents.
Yeah, so we've now updated the documentation to reflect that we support URIs, UUIDs, keywords and now maps as well. So that's good.
Yeah, as you can see, there are a number of bug fixes there as well, and related to various issues. But also, we've been working on making the documentation clearer as well.
Yeah, plenty more to come. So that's great. So another thing to mention would be something we got in release yesterday was this Docker Hub release. So it's a module, so it's not part of the core, which is why it's not really in this list. But it is, where is it? This one. So under Crux Docker, we have a README and talks about how to do it. We have exposed nREPL and pREPL support. But yeah, if I go to a command line and sorry, there we go, and run this command. Of course, I didn't copy and paste. Copy, paste. Right, and then was it Docker run? Anyway, essentially, we had an image which was previously recommended in the docs as a demo image, whereas this is actually something we're saying you can use this if you don't feel comfortable building your own closure-based server or a Java server which has Crux embedded. So if you just want to use Crux as a standalone database, this container should now give you some flexibility to start running things. So you can see an HTTP server is now up, and if I curl localhost,
Jeremy, you want to port map there?
I want to port map. Okay.
If you have a look on.
Yeah, you're right. Where is it?
There's a link to Docker Hub which has the instructions on the run syntax.
Yeah, there you go. Sorry, meant to have just slightly better. There you go. Thanks. So, like the previous image as well, this one also supports mapping your own local directory to be used by, say, the RocksDB indexes, so you can kill the container and restart it without having to do a full rebuild. So anyway, that will run in a moment. But yeah, there we go. So you can see the status API there. So yeah, you don't have to have any closure tools installed to run this. It's just Docker. And unlike the demo image, as I said before, this is something which we want to support for people to run in Kubernetes or wherever else you might want to do that. So that's that. Where are we now? So Dan, did you want to talk about the Java API changes?
Yes. So Crux has, well, Crux makes use of a Java API. It's always had one, but from a user like a use perspective, I think there was a number of issues personally. So it would require you to build up your own maps for your documents, and you'd have to also build up persistent vectors for transactions and things like that. And it would also require you, because Crux makes use of a lot of keywords, you'd have to use the closure keyword classes as well. So that was kind of like a motivating factor to make a sort of wrapper API on top of what we currently have, which is very much still a work in progress. But we made it with a number of kind of motivations, kind of like a mantra towards it, such as you shouldn't, if you are using it within Java, you shouldn't have to concern yourself with closure implementation details such as keyword.intern and collection types. But also we wanted to actually make proper use of Java, like the benefits of Java, like having a compile time check to prevent invalid requests, and strong typing, and also IDE auto-completion was another major factor as well. As well as that, we kind of wanted to take some lessons from closure and have a kind of general property to aim for, which was immutability over mutability and declarative over imperative. So off the back of that, we wrote a wrapper API, and if I'm all right to present, I was going to quickly show some of the like syntax and usage of it.
Yep, go for that.
Yeah. Okay. Should allow me to do it. Okay. There we go. Right. Let me know if that's presenting. Cool. Right, I'm going to go to the. So I wrote up a small set of just alpha documentation, which we've not quite put on the in the docs yet, but hopefully that should be easy enough to see. And that's so. The first example is starting up a standalone topology, or starting up a node with a standalone topology configuration. And again, so a lot of this kind of you get just almost completed for you by an IDE. But yeah, so it's rather than having to construct a map and pass it into start node, you construct the topology and you can start the node with that, and you get type hints. You get a lot of things from Java from that, and then just kind of scrolling through similar sort of thing for put operations, CAS operations. And then also queries as well. Queries are kind of they're kind of still you kind of pass in a string rather than having to pass in a complicated structure. But you don't just pass it in entirely. Just do query.query with a string. It's kind of broken down into the various clauses. So it's I think it's relatively clean and a lot nicer to use, basically. And that's more or less all I have to say on that.
That's a great summary. Thank you. So I think it's fair to say there's still a few things we could do with the Java API. We haven't sort of road tested using it from Scala or Kotlin. So there may be some things we could improve there. But yeah, there's some things in the query layer which we might yet improve. But certainly as far as things go, that's a good incremental step from the previous Java API, which is still supported, but will be deprecated, I think, in a future version. So anyone that's using it, you will have to move at the appropriate point. So next to talk about is the temporal semantics. James already sort of just touched on this with this change to put and delete. But this was an issue which I had raised a few months ago because I guess from my own intuition, it seemed sort of arbitrary the way the current semantics were there. I mean, it sort of had a lot of sympathy with the underlying model of storing these documents at a point in time, and each time you put a new document in, that document would be valid until the end of time. And so every time you put these documents in, they would have this relatively simple effect on the timeline. But when you introduce the end time, that then sort of became confusing as to what that really meant. So we took a step back and looked at the literature and sort of realized that, yeah, actually this idea of putting in the slice of history needed to be slightly refined. And so whilst we've done put and delete, there is arguably still some clarification on how compare and swap works when you have a range of potential values over a period and you want to compare over the period. Certainly for point in time work and for thinking about documents at given points rather than over a period. The changes we've made have sort of rounded off that general area, but there are clearly extra levels of things you can do with bitemporality, which Crux doesn't even attempt to model. So lots to think about there still. But yeah, put and delete now hopefully make a lot more intuitive sense to people that haven't already seen it. So that was good work, thank you. And as James said, the index changes mean that, so this is the TXIDs. We've reversed the sorting of the TXIDs and made a few other tweaks, which now mean that basically your indexes for existing Crux nodes will no longer run. If you try to upgrade to 1.6, you'll get an error saying incompatible index version. So the way to resolve this is to clean the index, and obviously you want to do some sort of blue-green migration to move to the newer version, but it will require a full index rebuild, which is an unfortunate limitation of the current architecture, but is definitely a simple and safe way of doing things rather than trying to figure out some sort of index to index mapping. So yeah, we can help anyone that's got any live data sets, production data sets with that upgrade process if there's any confusion there. But yeah, this is a relatively rare change. I don't think we've had an index change since April, I think it was. So that's that. For those who weren't aware, there's a module in the repository called Crux Kafka Connect, which is a Kafka connector, which is just a part of the Kafka project. Sort of allows various different systems, different databases to integrate with Kafka, push data in and out. And so we built this module to make that easier. So the idea is that if you want to customize it, you might want to look at the source, but otherwise, for people that aren't wanting to work with Clojure directly, you can go straight to the Confluent Hub. So just go to Confluent Hub, and you can now find the Crux connector here, which is very convenient if you don't want to. Yes.
Can you hit resume presenting?
Am I not presenting?
You got resume presenting down the bottom.
Ah, right. Okay.
Just that. Okay.
There we go. Thanks for that prompt. Right. Yes. So yes, that's funny. Right. So yeah, Confluent Hub is here, and if you click Crux, yeah, you'll see the connector has been pushed to Confluent, so they sort of own this repository, so we don't have direct access. So we're still waiting for them to upload 1.6.0. But essentially, if you just want to use Crux via Docker, just want to use the Java APIs, and you already have a Kafka installation, you can very easily get data streamed into Crux without having to do any Clojure-based configuration. So that's quite a powerful tool, and you can use this for potentially replicating between Crux instances. Maybe you could do sort of a filtered replication, or just use it for transforming data from one Kafka stream to another by doing some sort of data log joining in the middle through Crux. So lots of options there. What else have we got? Metrics. Tom, do you want to say what you've been doing with the metric stuff?
Yeah, the metrics ones will be a quick one. I can. This has been in the last week that we started properly thinking about how we're going to be doing metrics for Crux. Well, Crux, as we sort of move more into like the DevOps side of stuff. So like we've been looking at Docker and we're looking at Confluent Cloud. So the next thing on that sort of list is how you're managing them and how you're able to understand what's happening with the data that you're putting into them. So we've got there's some new issues up on the board, which you'll be able to see on the GitHub, of like adding, seeing how much disk space they're using, seeing how the transaction rate, seeing the ingest rate, seeing how long queries take. So that is like an imminent thing that we're working on at the moment. So currently I've got my machine. I'll quickly do a little bit of presentation on this, which we can display how many documents have been ingested. So this isn't just for a particular node. The ingest also reads in from, if you've got a Kafka stream with multiple nodes connected to it, also reads in the other one. So one second, I'll just concentrate for a second and share my screen. Right, am I on?
Yes.
Yep. So okay. So here's a demonstration on the right about how you go about using this thing. So I've got a REPL in the background starting up. In fact, it might have just yeah, all right, I'm connected. So I've got a node here just starting, So let's look at the status at that node. Yep, so we can see that we've got node.counts and no tx counts because we haven't submitted it. It's an empty node. So let's just submit some sample documents. Well, there's a sample document. So now we can see that we've got one document in our store. And then as a result, you get out this .count and tx count. So that's working quite nice. But then we've also got it set up with the metrics library, the Clojure metrics library, which I can never remember the name of.
Good hell.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. So I've got that just quickly displaying a counter. So this is evidently in, well, it's not even alpha at the moment, but this is something that we're going to be sort of developing, and then we're going to try and link this up to like Prometheus and JMX and get this whole like system sorted up so we can display all the metrics that people will actually be useful to people, rather than just at the moment we've got the status for nodes, but like you can only really do the analysis. There's not really any sort of like ingest rate besides looking at like the actual streams that are coming into Crux raw. So we're making it just a bit easier to measure nodes. So there's also a nice bit of code going on here where the way that we're I won't go into this too much because it's evident as a showcase, but the way that a Crux node works, it has multiple different records in there which implement certain protocols. So by redefining an ingest record, you can wrap it in new functions. So here's a thing that I wrap the ingest nodes in. So the indexer in. So we can see that like here it just where normally it would just be calling this function here. It's for the parent objects. I'm not sure the proper term. I'm still in the Java world of inheritance and that crap. But in here we've got redefining the indexer to add this extra method, like just wrapping it in this thing, which works out quite nice. So we'll see how far that goes as we take this metrics thing further, because this could also be used for the loads of other possibilities. In fact, one possibility it could be used for is wrapping it in a GraphQL to Crux resolver, which is a great segue to the next thing that I want to demonstrate off real quickly.
Go for it.
So the next thing on the list, which I won't trouble Jeremy to start presenting again, is this GraphQL to Crux resolver that we've been having a look at, because GraphQL is a graph-based API. So inherently, it seems like you can make arguments in your head before you even start doing any coding that there should be some sort of translation that we can do, because they seem so similar. Like if you look at the syntax between Datalog and the syntax between GraphQL, you can like even in your head you can sort of see that there's some sort of mirror there. So me and Dan have, and other people as well, have been doing this translator. And I've written this general case resolver for this small data set that I've done. So this is the data looks, let me just get my notes up for a sec. Yeah, okay. So this data set on the right is what we're going to be working with. So this is what we want to display through a GraphQL endpoint. So we've got 3 crew members from some Star Trek characters, and then we've got their home planets that are associated with them. And they're all each associated with like an ID of the planet that they're with. The name of the planet they're with. So this is evidently crafted to be in a graph data set, but this is like just a generic thing. So we've been using Lucina as a way to talk to Crux through GraphQL. So Lucina outputs this very nice data object, which has all the information. It passes all this, it passes the query through this schema that you also supply. So although Crux doesn't have a schema, the GraphQL part of it does. So there is a limitation at the point, but it's nice because it means that you don't have to write a schema twice. You only need to write it for the accessing. You don't actually need to write any of the schema for Crux, but I won't plug Crux any more than that at the moment. So how Lucina works is for each of these queries that you provide in the schema, you have to provide a resolver. So what we've done is provided a generic resolver. So here it says, like, if you look at where it's resolving to, all of these, like both the crew things are resolving to query/crew. So even though they're asking for different things, we're able to determine from what the schema parameters what you actually want out the database. So here is the resolution map, so the resolver map. So we only have 2, and even these, I just haven't. This is basically was all developed in a spike, so I haven't had time to generalize it further. But 100% would be possible to generalize a bit further. So at the moment, I provide whether they're looking for a crew or a planet, which you can immediately see from just the namespacing. But that's besides the point. So this form query is how you do a generic thing. So it looks through this massive Lucena GraphQL object, well, map rather, and extracts all the fields out. So a query looks something like this. So you, in fact, I'll bring that up in an editor. So you have, it's just a post request, and then you pass it this query. And then in here is the GraphQL bit. So we have, this is the name of it. So crew by home planet. The home planet that we're looking for is Earth. And then it gives back a crew. So we want their ID, their name, their rank, and then the home planet that we initially asked for. So you can see that in Crux, maybe it would be something like this. So it would be like, we want to find like this crew member with an ID and a name and a rank and a home planet. And so where, and then you would construct these ID fields, and then eventually at one point you would have something that would be like where home planet is like is Earth. So like even in your head you can understand how you would start writing this query. So if I run that, there's this. I've already got it running, so we see that we get out this Lucena map back, so we can see that the crew member who lives on Earth is called Benjamin Sisko with their name and his rank is commanding officer. So you've got this really nice translation. So I won't go too deep into the code now, but it basically references the objects that it extracts out the fields that it extracts out of this massive Lucena map with a translation map that you provide here. And evidently, because I wrote the data set, it's basically just not even replacing the name. But it would be, if your data set was a little nastier and you wanted to clean it up with namespacing and all sorts of stuff, it would be very easy to by just like putting it all in this translation map. So this code's on, I believe it's not at the moment. It's going to be in docs examples. It's on a pull request at the moment, but this code is accessible on GitHub for anybody who's vaguely interested. So yeah, thank you very much.
That's awesome, and it's really cool because it's a way to use the query engine without having to, assuming someone's already written a resolver for you. You don't have to think about Datalog or think about Eden.
Yeah, it's
just pick it up as a JavaScript person.
Yeah, it's like, I think another way that we're sort of moving forward with Crux, it seems to me, is that we're sort of like trying to make it accessible for everybody. It's not just a Clojurians database. We're eventually going to expand it out and give everybody the joy of Crux.
Absolutely right. This Christmas, yeah. Well, maybe next year. Right. So thanks for doing that. So last thing to actually say before beta, which I meant to put on this slide, is John has been working on a Crux query inspector, which spits out some graph viz, which looks like this. And I'll talk for John because I think he's traveling in the car at the moment. But essentially, we have a bug which sort of is to do with these rules, which they're both trying to operate at the same time, and I don't know, there's some sort of timeout issue. So in order to help fix this, John's been working more on his sort of query analysis explainer spike, and came up with this visualization, which gives you a flavor for how these iterators work over the underlying Crux indexes. But short of John on the call to explain it, I'll save it. I do know that we are trying to figure out how to get the graph viz sorted in increasing order, because right now they're out of order. But certainly something like this will help explain to people how the query engine works, which is quite exciting. Great. So the last thing, yes, is beta. So people may be wondering, when is Crux going to be officially generally available? Well, the answer is once the beta program's over. Then the question is, well, when does the beta program begin? And we're going to start it in January. The exact date is to be confirmed. We did have a plan about being like it's going to start on the 6th of January. But we had some, I guess, client projects which we had to sort of prioritize resourcing for that. So we're still looking to start in January. And we'll update the details on the website as and when that's ready. But yeah, it's going to be an exciting 6 months, I think. And I'd hope by XT20, which if you haven't seen is Jux's latest innovation in conferencing, which is in July, we're going to have general availability, or aim to have that by July. That's the current plan. And our sort of benchmark for general availability is that the people who are part of the beta program sort of sign off on it and say, yeah, this is good enough, this is ready. It fits for our use cases, the APIs are stable, etc. So the more people we have in the beta program, and that's organizations, companies, but as well as individual, open source users or people that want to contribute to Crux, we'd love to have you as part of the program. So let's stay in touch and be part of the people who I guess give the quality approval to Crux. But yeah, it's definitely going to be happening soon. So with that, I'll go to Q&A and open it up to, I think it may just be France, we're on the line right now, but yeah, has anyone got any questions?
I'm surprised I'm the only one. I'm not using Crux at the moment. I'm a very enthusiastic person, but I did think about it in a use case in the past, for which I built a prototype. I used DataScript. Crux wasn't out at that time, actually. But one thing that I quite enjoyed in DataScript, and which really, I was working in a shop which isn't actually a Clojure shop, so and they were handling sports data. But the data they received was actually quite verbose. They were sending documents with all the entities each time in there about games and players and so on. But only a few of them were changing inside the document. And when you transact the information into DataScript, you were able to get back the list of updated entities actually from the transactions, which made it quite easy for me to tell them, well, listen, from all the documents you receive, actually only 3% of the entities you receive in your data are updated and deserve an update. I'm not sure if Crux has got that ability. I believe you are an asynchronous model which prevents you from getting a list of transacted datums right away. I guess that's the DataScript terminology. But it was quite an interesting feature. So I'm not sure if there is any way to compensate for that, or to have that ability back. It would be, I guess, about entity recognition and being able to decide which part of the documents really correspond to an update. And the other aspect was the fact that, let me remember, there was, well, I guess that's the first question for now. Let's start with that.
Yeah, go for it. So I guess my initial response is that, subscriptions, I guess is the title we're sort of using at the moment, potentially has overlap with things like notifications or data flow or streaming or replication. But if you want to subscribe to the changes for a particular entity, you could certainly do that with Crux efficiently. We want to add some hooks. There's an issue open currently for adding hooks, which would allow you sort of cleaner access to be able to do that. And you would know based on validated transactions. So it would be, these are the transactions that succeeded, and then synchronously spitting out a list of changes according to some predicates or rules. So that's definitely something which, we're aware of, like a short-term easy win if we can implement it. So we're definitely looking to do that. If you want to do more sophisticated things like have a a data log query that knows vaguely when it needs to rerun itself based on changes to entities that it's explicitly tracking, then there are sort of more incremental ways to achieve that. So actually, something we wrote recently was a function which allowed you to travel backwards in time and see any entities that were returned by a query. If they had changed, you'd be able to see that they had changed at specific points, and therefore you would know when the query value has changed or the query result has changed. So that's more complex and much harder to generalize. And sort of the end result of that, thinking about that, is this data flow concept, which is, I guess, 3DF's sort of main claim to fame. Yeah, which is, I guess, an orthogonal problem to what Crux is trying to solve at the moment. But we have done a spike to integrate Crux with 3DF. But it is a hard problem, and fundamentally the underlying query algorithm that we're using right now doesn't support sort of this incremental view maintenance, which 3DF supports very naturally because it's built on the core Rust runtime, which is purely designed for just doing that. So yeah, it's a completely different technology, really. But we're certainly interested in solving that as a use case and tackling the easy use cases. I don't know if that answers the question enough.
Yeah, I think it was kind of a weird question, I suppose, for you. But the point was more about the fact that your asynchronous model does make sense, and the use of DataScript on my side was really opportunistic in the sense that I could easily right away, when transacting information, find out what was changed. But you could go asynchronous in that way as well if you wanted to. In fact, you could even use DataScript as an in-memory database and still post to Crux, because the question of persistence still remains anyway in this use case. You wouldn't use DataScript for that, but it does allow you to have an in-memory version of your database, which actually Crux could even keep up to date. Or again, it's something that I've played with back in the days. The other question that I forgot and that I remember now is more related to what you just spoke about. It's the time ranges, actually. And in sports data, sometimes you do have events happening in the future, and you do want to put information out there only at certain times, or make sure they're only available at certain times. So that question was more about, well, can you do that in the future as well, your time ranges?
Yeah. So Crux, I mean, we mainly built for the historical case where you want to backfill old data, but yeah, you can schedule data for the future as well. So one user of this, I don't know if you may have seen on the Open Crux site, there's Oscaro, who are this e-commerce site in France, and they're actually using Crux for their voucher system at the moment. So their vouchers have a validity start and a validity end period, and so they're inserting information about when that voucher code stops being valid into the future and relying on that.
Yeah, so at the end of the time I was working on this thing, I was basically, hearing about Crux, and I thought, hey, that could be a very interesting use cases for those situations where you have future events or corrections. They call them data fixes, in the past, regarding data, because they were receiving a lot of data regarding, events in the game, whether it is for rugby or football or whichever. So I think Crux would definitely fit in there in that scenario. I suppose you don't have a JavaScript API. You're working on a Java API, but the JavaScript for now is just REST, isn't it?
So we have a ClojureScript API, which so when you use Crux via HTTP, we already have like a Clojure HTTP API, which is blocking. So like it's it only runs in Java. So we did do a spike to convert that into a CLJC API using Promesa as a promise library, so that could actually work on Clojure as an asynchronous API alternative, or as ClojureScript. So there's already a ClojureScript API, which we could then expose in a similar way to DataScript, to how DataScript does it, maybe more elegantly if we can, to make it accessible to JavaScript users. So and that could be on Node.js or in the browser. Although we wouldn't recommend the browser unless you're sort of very sensible about how you're securing it. But that would be
Node.js would be probably the primary target there, obviously. Full querying capabilities to your end clients, I think.
I don't know if you're aware, we have this Crux console, which is now moved out to there's a Crux Labs organization, which is sort of the home for these spikes and things that we're working on. But the console uses this single page app talking directly to a Crux HTTP port over cores, and uses this closure script wrapper. So if anyone's interested, you can take a look there.
Cool.
But yeah, what you mentioned about future intersection with the future, I mean, anyone that's worked with a content management system, this is like the main problem for advanced CMS use cases, where you have all kinds of scheduling, whether it's scheduling of like actual images or scheduling of the content objects, and how those content objects need to come in and out of activation. Sometimes you have rules like only show this banner ad at certain times of day, or Monday to Friday, and you have multiple rules conflicting. So if you want to schedule this other one, like maybe another one takes priority over the first one, and you want to be able to preview in the future and actually say what is this going to look like, so that I know for the big Black Friday event that everything's going to look as it should do. So it's a big problem in content management systems, which is maybe a great fit for Crux, which is somewhat accidental because it wasn't exactly the use cases we had in mind when building this, because it was as we already discussed, mainly around corrections. Cool.
Yeah, it makes sense. Although it's more about data, what I was talking about, but content is data anyway. But it's the validity of data in the future is an analytical scenario which Crux fits very well.
Yeah, and things like insurance policies as well. That's always sort of past and future oriented. So tracking who has coverage that's valid for different periods of time allows you to build up risk models and that sort of thing. Cool. All right. Anyone else have any questions? Or Francois, if you have more questions, go for it.
Not right now, but it's really great to hear you guys what you're working on. Again, I'm not using Crux, but I'm a very enthusiastic watcher, I guess, of your projects after having done this data script stuff in the past, and thinking it would be great to have such a powerful querying mechanism on top of something like Kafka. And I guess you guys started to build it.
Yeah, that's not the first time we've heard that, actually. People saying, "Oh, it'd be great to have data log on top of Kafka," and hey presto, Crux appears. So it's nice to hear that. Thank you. All right, well, I'm going to stop the recording unless anyone else wants to interrupt with another question. All right, thanks for listening in. Catch you next time.